Hello, and good morning to all of you beautiful and chipper folk. I'm struggling extra hard with the intro today, to be frank. Since rewatching the trailer for Flowers of the Killer Moon, that is all I've been able to think of. It's the only thing on my mind. That film will be the first time I will physically go to a movie theater in years. I'll probably cry. Honestly, I'll be a bit worried if I don't cry. The story behind that film and the book is absolutely heart-wrenching. I'm tinkering with the idea of doing a longer episode about the Osage tribe and their harrowing story to possibly coincide with the piqued interest surrounding the movie, but that may take a better man than me to tell you the truth. If you haven't heard of this at all, don't worry. People have been trying to cover up the truth about it for decades, so you're not alone. In fact, before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's episode, I'd like to give you a brief synopsis of the book/true story of Killers of the Flower Moon, simply because of how moving it truly is. I won't give any spoilers away either, I promise. This comes from both instaread.com and then another source I'll list. Quote, Killers of the Flower Moon narrates a series of murders on the Osage Reservation in Oklahoma. In the 1920s, members of the Osage tribe were killed as part of a plot to deprive them of their oil wealth. Author David Grann studies the murders, the resulting FBI investigation, and the structural discrimination against Native American people which inspired and enabled the killings. The killings centered around the family of Molly Burkhart, an Osage woman. In 1921, her sister Anna Brown was shot. Then, Molly's mother became sick and died. The family suspected poison. A bomb planted beneath the home of Molly's sister Rita and her husband, Bill Smith, killed them both. A number of other suspicious deaths took place, and researchers believe that dozens of people were killed as part of this conspiracy. Citizens and private detectives undertook investigations. However, these investigations lost momentum because the investigators, including cattle baron William Hale, turned out to be in league with the murderers. One investigator, the prosecutor W. Vaughn, claimed to have cracked the case. Before he could reveal any details, he was killed while traveling to speak to a key witness, and his body was thrown from a train. The tribe pressured the federal government to become involved, and the newly formed FBI was brought into the case. J. Edgar Hoover was very eager to solve the crimes and burnish the reputation of the Bureau. He appointed Agent Tom White, a former Texas Ranger, to head the investigation. Officially, the count of the wealthy Osage victims reaches at least 20, but author David Grant suspects that hundreds more may have been killed because of their ties to oil. End quote. Just insane, shocking, unbelievable, heartbreaking, and everything in between. But yeah, so that's what I've been solely daydreaming about for the past week. Moving on to our full-length tale story. Peace. I'm Eli, and this is Murder in the Morning. My sources today come from Wikipedia, Instaread, Murderpedia, Medium.com, and the rest will be in my additional notes. You ready to get slapped in the face? Hold tight, because gruesome doesn't even begin to describe what I'm about to tell you. I thought somebody just knocked on the door. Sorry, I spooked myself. Today, I bring you the Butcher of Rostov. While I tend to love most butchers to death, this one simply reeks of death. Andrei Chikatilo I hope I'm saying that right, or Chikatilo, but I believe it's Andrei Chikatilo, was born in a small village in Ukraine in October of 1936. Immediately, he began a shite life, just wretched from the jump. With a father who left for some random World War number 2 just after his birth, and a mother who did the opposite of love him, or if you will, abuse him, you almost feel bad for the kid at first. His mom and new stepdad, they worked for food and living space, leaving the family zilch for money. Andrei and his siblings would sometimes have to eat grass to avoid starvation. And while that was tough enough, just existing, it didn't help that he was constantly bullied and belittled at school for his old clothes or his scrawny figure. I mean, kids can just be cruel. And then, what can be a very leading sign in cases like this, came the bedwetting. Quote, in addition to the external hardships, Andrei is believed to have suffered from, forgive me here, hydrocephalus, or water on the brain at birth, which caused him genital urinary tract problems later in life, including bedwetting in his late adolescence and later the inability to sustain an erection. End quote. That last part will play a massive role in his later life. Remember when I said his mother didn't love him? Well, after each bedwetting incident, she would just beat the crap out of him, this young child. And then over time, all of these terrible experiences added up. Andrei left his village a loner, and I assume quite traumatized. I would be. Over the next decade or so, his life remains pretty stagnant and unfulfilling. He moved to a town called Rostov and lived with his sister, who was nice enough to try and set him up on some dates, as he was clearly not doing so hot on his own. Quote, his younger sister engineered a meeting with a local girl, Faina, whom he went on to marry in 1963. Despite his sexual problems and lack of interest in conventional sex, they produced 2 children and lived an outwardly normal family life. In 1971, a career change to a school teacher was short-lived when a string of complaints about indecent assaults on young children forced him to move from school to school before he finally settled at a mining school in Shakhty, near Rostov. End quote. Those complaints that they are referring to in the quote are much, 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 much more than it may lead you to believe. The instances included forcing a young girl against a wall while touching her genitalia, inappropriately, or when he locked a young boy in his classroom and proceeded to molest him. Or how about the fact that he was in charge of the girls' boarding wing and would rush in unannounced in hopes of catching the children naked? What the frick? But now, living in Shakhty, just outside Rostov, Andrei would escalate this behavior to a level I never hope to comprehend. Quote, Chikatilo committed his first documented murder on the 22nd of December 1978 in the city of Shakhty. There, he lured the 9-year-old Yelena Z to a house he purchased in secret. He tried to rape her, but couldn't get an erection. He then choked and stabbed her 3 times in the abdomen. He reached climax while stabbing the child. He then proceeded to dump her body in the Gruesca River. She was found 2 days later. Even though there was evidence linking Andrei Chikatilo to the crime, including people describing a man resembling him and bloodstains found near his house, Alexander Kravchenko, a man that served prison time for raping and killing a teenage girl previously, was arrested for this crime, although he had a strong alibi. So this Alexander was then convicted of murder and sentenced to death. End quote. This, you'll come to see, is the first of many fumbles by investigators. After such a close call with authorities after only his first kill, Andrei took a 3-year hiatus from murder. And in the meantime, he tried to get another job as a teacher. Luckily, with the child abuse rumors swirling around him, he was never able to find anything new in a position around children, thankfully. So, Andrei ends up working for a mining company in which he is employed as a traveling clerk. This new position would allow the man access to young children all over the region for the next 9 years. Yes, 9 friggin' years. Heads up, this next paragraph is the thick of it. No more dancing around his dirty deeds. Quote, hold on. I feel like I say quote weird. Maybe it's my Minnesota accent, but I feel like I always go, quote. Anyways, on September 3rd, 1981, Larissa T., 17, became his next victim. He strangled, stabbed, and gagged her with dirt and leaves to prevent her from crying out. The brutal force afforded Andrei his sexual release, and he began to develop a pattern of attack that saw him focus on young runaways of both sexes, whom he befriended at train stations and bus stops, before luring them into nearby forest areas where he would attack them, attempt rape, and use his knife as a penis substitute to mutilate them. In a number of cases, he ate the sexual organs or removed other body parts such as the tips of their noses or tongues. In the earliest cases, the common pattern was to inflict damage to the eye area, slashing across the sockets and removing the eyeballs in many cases, an act which Chikatilo later attributed to a belief that his victims kept an imprint of his face in their eyes, even after death. End quote. Whew, okay. This guy, man. That's kind of what he does to his victims. And now after that second killing, he kind of just takes off. Ready for this? 9 months later, in June of 1982, he murdered a 13-year-old girl by stabbing her 22 times. He follows this by killing 5 more people aged 9 to 18 between July and September that same year. And then, in December of 1982, he lured a 10-year-old girl, Olga S., off of a bus and proceeded to stab her over 50 times. Many of these victims showed the same MO across the board. The slashed eyes, the mutilated genitalia, blah, 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 the strangulation, all the gross things. Unlike today, serial killers back then were still very much taboo and not well researched or even considered an option much. And this even much more so in Ukraine 40 plus years ago. However, due to the similarities and sheer number of victims within one single year, Soviet police had to finally acknowledge that there may be a serial killer at work here. And this shifted police focus almost entirely towards the single investigation, but still turned up nothing in regard to these multiple murders. On the other hand, some good did come from this massive shift in focus. Quote, as a result of the investigation, more than 1,000 unrelated crimes, including 95 murders, 145 assaults, and 245 rapes were solved. End quote. But on the other hand, Andrei still showed no sign of slowing down. In the fall of 1983, he murdered a 19-year-old sex worker, Vera, and a 14-year-old boy named Sergei, whom he had lured away from another train station. This poor boy had over 70 stab wounds inflicted upon him. Like, first it was 22, and then it was 50, and now it's 70. Chill, my guy. And then came 1984, possibly his worst year ever. Where was Wonder Woman then? Quote, there it is again. Quote, in January and February 1984, Chikatilo proceeded to kill 2 other women in Rostov's park. On the 24th of March, he killed 10-year-old Dmitry P. Several witnesses saw him walking with the boy previous to his murder and were able to provide the police with a clear, accurate description of Andrei. On the 25th of May, Andrei killed a woman called Tatiana P. and her 10-year-old daughter Svetlana. By the end of July, he had killed 3 further young women between the ages of 19 and 21 and a 13-year-old boy. Then, on the 2nd of August, he killed a 16-year-old girl named Natalia G. On the 7th of August, he killed 17-year-old Lyudmila, and she suffered 39 slash wounds before he mutilated and disemboweled her. He intentionally inflicted wounds on this girl that he knew would not be immediately fatal. Her body was found the next day with her upper lip cut off and inside her mouth. By the 15th of August, 1984, he had killed another woman and a 10-year-old. After another 2 weeks, the body of an 11-year-old was found just a few yards away from the body of where the previous girl was found. The boy had been strangled, castrated, and had his eyes gouged out. And on the 6th of September, Chikatilo killed a young librarian named Irina Luchinskaya. Irina L. End quote. I mean, my God. Fucking how many people was that? I can't even count them all. I just have a total at the end for you. And now, possibly the worst time for this, comes fumble number 2 by investigators. Andrei Chikatilo, quote, was arrested for behaving suspiciously at a bus station, but again avoided suspicion on the murder charges as his blood type did not match the suspect profile. But he was in prison for 3 months for a number of minor outstanding offenses. What was not realized at the time was that Andrei Chikatilo's actual blood type, type A, was different from the type found in his other bodily fluids, type AB, as he was a member of a minority group known as, quote, non-secretors, whose blood type cannot be inferred by anything other than a blood sample. As police had only a sample of semen and not blood from the crime, Chikatilo was able to escape suspicion of murder. Today's sophisticated DNA techniques are not subject to the same fallibility. Fallibility? Fallibility. Ugh! End quote. I did not know any of that. Interesting. So essentially, his sperm was type AB, but his blood was just type A, and they didn't connect him to any of those, what seems like thousands of murders already. So again, he slips through the cracks only to kill again. As he wasn't completely idiotic, our boy does lay low for a little while following that arrest, seemingly for the first time since he started this murder campaign. It's not until 1985, a year later, does he kill again. In August of that year, he killed 2 young women named Natalia and Irina, both under 20. Keep in mind, the investigation has not slowed. He simply couldn't resist the urge any longer. These 2 killings were seemingly enough to hold him over for another year. He took a little hiatus again, but then for the next 2 years, Andrei would kill 3 times each in both 1987 and 1988. 2 12-year-olds, a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old, and 2 other young children. In 1989 and 1990, Andrei escalated once more, just unable to help himself. And this comes from the Medium article. Quote, Chikatilo did not kill again until the 1st of March, 1989. On that day, he killed a 16-year-old girl in his daughter's vacant flat. He dismembered her and threw the remains in the sewer. The murder was not linked to the serial killer due to the different MO. Between May and August of 1989, Andrei killed another 4 victims. On the 14th of January, 1990, Andrei encountered 11-year-old Andrei Kravchenko outside the theater. He took this kid and emasculated and stabbed the boy multiple times. He was found the following month. 7 weeks later, on the 7th of March, Andrei killed a 10-year-old boy by the name of, Yaroslav Makarov, and his body was found the next day. Andrei then killed 3 further victims by August of 1990. Stay with me, we're not done yet. On the 4th of April, he killed 31-year-old Lyubov Z. Her body was found in August. On the 28th of July, he killed 13-year-old Viktor Petrov, and on the 14th of August, he killed 11-year-old Ivan Fomin. On October 17th, Chikatilo killed 16-year-old Vadim Gramov and proceeded to castrate him, stab him 27 times, and cut the tip of his tongue off. He was found on the 30th of October, and on the same day, Vadim Gramov was found. On the same day Vadim was found, Chikatilo stabbed another boy, 16-year-old Viktor Tishchenko, 40 times. End quote. Like, he just wouldn't give it a goddamn rest, for crying out loud. That's absurd. Finally, after a lifetime of inflicting pain for his own pleasure, Andrei committed his final murder in November of 1990. He killed and mutilated 22-year-old Svetlana K. Her death would lead to his capture. On November 20th of 1990, Andrei was arrested following suspicious behavior near a train or a bus stop. Like his first arrest years ago, he admitted to nothing, wouldn't tell the cops anything. But the lead investigator, by the name of Burakov, was smart enough to play into Andrei's narcissistic side. Quote, Burakov decided to allow the psychiatrist, Bukovnatsky, who had prepared the original profile, to talk to Andrei, under the guise of trying to understand the mind of a killer from a scientific context. Chikatilo, clearly flattered by this approach, opened up to the psychiatrist, providing extensive details of all of his killings, and even leading police to the site of bodies previously undiscovered. He claimed to have taken the lives of 56 victims, although only 53 of these could be independently verified. This figure was far in excess of the 36 cases that the police had initially attributed to their serial killer. End quote. They finally got him. After brutally killing and dismembering over 50 young children and adults, Andrei had been stopped. The trial was an easy one, to say the least. With his guilt essentially a foregone conclusion, Andrei was sentenced to death, plus 86 years for his crimes, which I kind of like that. And on February 14th, wait, is that Valentine's Day? I can't remember. 1994, Andrei was executed by a single shot to the back of his head. He was then buried in an unmarked grave on the prison grounds. Goodbye. Even today, decades later, 40 plus years later, whatever it is, the Butcher of Rostov is still considered to be one of history's most infamous serial killers. Just a traumatic stain in history. But that is all she wrote. There you have it. The story of the Red Ripper, the Rostov Ripper, or the Butcher of Rostov. I hope you enjoyed it, albeit extremely awful, gruesome, and full of child death. I'm sorry about that. Today, I actually have something to end on. It's a quote here from the author of the Medium article I referenced a whole lot. She put a little author's note at the end of her article, and it kind of resonated with me. So let me just read that, if you will. Quote, quote, I am aware that this article is full of names, dates, and gruesome details, but this is a little history lesson into what his childhood looked like and what led to his evilness during adulthood. I do believe that it is worth mentioning all of the names of his victims as they should be remembered, not just by their families, but by an entire world that was shocked and horrified by Andrei Chikatilo's actions. End quote. Yeah, ditto, girl. I think I said something like that a few weeks ago. Woo! Okie dokie. I'm off. I will see you turd burglars next time. Bye-bye. Love you.